Hi everyone, this is the Lockdown Lecture Series for Intermediate Cello, adapted from the Alias Music Foundations course, adapted from the classroom setting. Let's jump into Lesson 4. So last week we assigned accuracy work for the second and third movements, and let's start by playing through them in a moderate tempo and just kind of seeing if you guys can keep up. If you guys can keep up, then your homework's done, and we'll take a look at some of our quality work for these movements. So here we go, moderate tempo. 1 and 2. Bars of rest that we're going to skip. So if you could keep up, good job. You have done your homework. Let's take a look at our quality work on the second movement. So if we look at all of our quality elements, things such as intonation, sound quality, and articulation, vibrato, movement. In the first movement, the sound itself was really important, but the articulation really wasn't much of an issue. Vibrato was super important, and then the movement was also important because we had long flowing sound. Now, this movement is going to be different. Like this, if you think of these two movements as two separate pieces, now they're just completely different pieces. Intonation is always important, and if it sounded about as in tune as I played it, then excellent, you're ready to move on. The sound itself is important, but what's really important is articulation. You see all these staccato marks, and that becomes really important in our playing. Vibrato is not going to be a major issue. There's not very many notes we can vibrate, especially when we play at full tempo. So let's talk about articulation. Now, looking at the page, you are not going to be able to get all the information you need. Even the composers that notated their music the most meticulously wouldn't notate it kind of clearly enough, because the truth is, I mean, we know of just a few marked articulations, right? I mean, as far as I could mark in terms of just markings, I have legato, staccato, and then no articulation. Sometimes composers will write sautillé or détaché or spiccato over their music, but even that, there are, dozens, if not hundreds, of different nuances of staccato. So there's really only two ways for you to figure out exactly what is required of you. One is through a great reference recording. So you want a really good reference recording, which you have, so you should really be listening to it so you can intuit what kind of staccato is needed here. And another is if a teacher explains it to you. So I will explain some of it, but hopefully you guys are listening to the recording and are picking some of this up yourselves. So we have at the top, let me switch over here. There we go. At the top right here, we have two notes slurred. So with two slurred notes, they're all on the string. The next note after that has a staccato mark on it. Now, because it has a staccato mark, I will have to lift my bow off the string right before it. So it's going to sound kind of like this. I lift. It sort of essentially feels like a crescendo lift. Now, the next note, I'm going to gently land on the string and a little bit crescendo lift that one too. In fact, this energetic, smooth lift sort of thinking crescendo lift every note is the kind of articulation that we want. Now, if you've learned the whole piece with metronome and it's memorized, that's great. That part is, you've taken care of that. Now we're going to slow down as much as we need to get the articulation right. And essentially, it should look like this. Oh, missed that one. Sorry again. So sort of a staccato landing and crescendo lift. And then smooth. Creating these circle lifts with each of my notes, and it's giving each note this lifted energy, right? So this is for the second movement. Now I practice as slow as I need to. If you need to practice this slowly, circle lift, circle lift. Let's switch back a little bit so you guys can see better. My circle lifts are done in the lower part of the bow because the tip is not going to sound very good. Lower half is good. Even in the middle, I don't quite have the control I want. I want everything kind of at the frog. Now, once you have figured out, I've got the kind of sound that I want in a slow tempo, and this is important because our energy of our piece is created by its articulation, not by its speed. Once you get the energy of the piece with the articulation you want, then you can work up your tempo. Now, for articulation work, you could do a metronome workup, or you can just arbitrarily move the speed up, whatever feels right. So moderate tempo should sound something like this. Full tempo should be something closer like this. So each note has a bite to it, but it also lifts off the string and creates a lot of energy. So that's what you guys are going to be working on for the articulation for this piece. Now, once you have that down, and only when you have it down, you can add vibrato on your long quarter notes that are not open strings, like, for example, your last note of section A1 or the last two notes of section A2. So essentially you add that, and it just adds a little bit of brightness at the end of the phrase. Sounds like this. So that's my second movement. Now the third movement has another kind of new articulation combination. And that is the first two notes, you have this tenuto mark on the first note, followed by the staccato mark of the second note. And that's going to create this kind of articulation. So long on the string, and then without a staccato crescendo lift. So you want to practice that one separately and add it in. In a slow tempo, it would sound like this. You can tell even here, right? There's going to be on the string and then a lift, and it creates this sort of landing and then bouncing right back up. And you can tell the characters in the story, if you've listened to the story version, are just kind of jovial and happy and dancing along, and the music just totally reflects it. So in a slower tempo, it sounded like that. In a moderate tempo, it might sound like this. faster tempo, it might sound like this. Right, so work it up in your tempo until you get the quality that you want. Then add vibrato on your longer notes. So that's the second and third movement. And your next lesson, we're going to work. Your homework is to do quality work here, but we're also skipping ahead to the sixth movement. And your job is to do accuracy work and learn the sixth movement slowly. Okay. Pull it up here so you can see it a little bit better. See the whole thing. There we go. So sixth movement in a slow tempo sounds like this. Okay. Now, watch out for the fingerings, and let me give you guys some section markers. We have A1. A1 goes to here. Here is A2. You guys can write these in your parts. A2. Here is A3. Right here. A4. And then finally here. Actually, I believe that just goes all the way to the end. Let me double check. 3 bars, 1, 2, 3. Yes. So A4 is a little bit longer. It goes all the way through to the end right here. So that is your sixth movement. It's not difficult. A working tempo for this movement would be a quarter note equals 60. Now, just like for the other movement, it's a little bit technical, so you might want to start at a slower tempo counting an eighth note, so half tempo. Instead of counting 1 E and a 1 E and a, you might want to count 1 E and a 1, kind of start slower. Okay, and then work your way up to maybe 1 E and a 1, which is about 60, so it sounds like this for next week. Or for the next lesson. Next lesson, we will learn some special drilling techniques that deal with left-hand velocity, and we will get it to our full tempo. So that's what's coming up next. It's a really fun piece. Have fun practicing. I'll see you guys at the next lesson.